Welcome back to another video, folks. Welcome back to what I've titled The Long and the Short of It, because that seems to be the choice that we're forced to make with our German Armour selection options for what I'm calling early mid-war. So that's like the desert and the Stalingrad battles. So after having played quite a few Stalingrad battles lately, I thought it's probably worthwhile reflecting on what I learned about the German armour options. Here is a fine selection of the vehicles we've been using in our games. Let's have a look at the various types. We have Panzer IIIs, of which there are 3 types. Panzer IVs, of which there are 2 types. Armour cars, of which there are there's 3 of them sitting there, but there's actually 4 types. Panzer IIs, which are just nice and simple, and Marders, which once again are nice and simple. Starting with the Panzer IIIs, you can see the 3 options here. We've got long-barrelled 50s, short-barrelled 50s, and with a snub-barrelled 75. They've all got different points. They all start off with the basic points for the short 50, and then you've got the long 50, and then you've got the snub 75. That's the most expensive. It's got the heat rule, which means at long range it's more effective, and it's got the same anti-tank rating as the the long-barrelled Panzer III with the same range, but a firepower of 3. Now, that 3-up firepower is one of the real differences when choosing your Panzer IIIs, as we discovered in games. They've got the same armour, but they all hit differently, and sometimes the most critical thing after you've got a hit is what's your firepower. If you've got a 4-up firepower that the 50s have, then you only have a 50-50 chance of destroying any targets that fail to save, whereas this guy has got a more or less 2 and 3 chance. These have got a 1 and 3, these have got a 2 and 3. Obviously they're more expensive. So Panzer IIIs, let's think about that as a unit and how we might take them. So are you going to take Panzer IIIs in support of an infantry company, like a grenadier company? Well, I think that's probably a good choice. What you're going to have to decide about how you're going to take them is whether or not they're going to be your main anti-tank support, or if they're going to be a general support. So if you're just going for general support, which is perhaps taking out anti-tank guns, perhaps it's machine guns you want to destroy, or assault or such likes, then you want the cheap guys. You just want the 50 mils, short-barrelled, that is. If you're looking for some anti-tank capability, well then you're going to have the option of the snub 75 or the long 50. What I would suggest is that you consider what your available points are for your Panzer IIIs, for your tank support in that company, and decide whether or not you want that 3-up firepower, which is going to cost you more. That may reduce the size of your grenadier company, or it may mean you have less Marders perhaps than you could have. But those short-barrelled are better anti-tank. So think about what you're doing. If you're having a Panzer III company, not supporting a grenadier company, then there's every opportunity to have a good mix of all of them. So you can have horses for courses. You can have these guys and these guys for taking out enemy armour, these guys for assaulting, perhaps leading the way, maybe flushing out those ambushing platoons. But if you're going for an infantry company, I would base my choice of what type of gun to take on what other anti-tank options you're already bringing with you. So there you go, there's Panzer IIIs. 3 choices, but basically, in reality, 2 options, but different points for one of those options. So Panzer IV, short barreled and long barreled. Well, they're very, very different kind of tanks. The long barreled, it's got a good range and a good anti-tank rating. The short barreled, kind of speaks for itself, it's snub-nosed little gun, and the range doesn't compete, neither does the anti-tank rating, but it can fire bombardments. But, you know, that's an expensive mobile artillery weapon, so you might want to look at other options, even something as simple as, depending on what your list is, maybe just mortars, you know, nebs, or such like, something nice and cheap. As an artillery weapon, it's quite expensive, so think very carefully before you sink points into them. If you need to stand as an artillery weapon in plain sight, well, that better armour will help, but apart from that, I can't see any real advantage. These guys are much better at killing tanks. They're better than the Panzer IIIs at hitting and killing tanks. Got better anti-tank. It's got the same firepower as the short-barreled Panzer III, same anti-tank as the short-barreled and long, but the snub-barreled rather, and the long 50. But they're very expensive in points, extremely expensive. 4 of these could get you 3 Marders and 3 short-barreled Panzer IIIs. So let's think about when you would want to take them. I would say as a support unit for Grenadiers, you're better going for the other option. The Panzer IIIs for getting in close, doing the dirty work, and the Marders for doing the long range fencing and knocking out enemy armour. If you had a armour company, well, you're probably better going all the way with Panzer IIIs and Marders. Only really go down the Panzer IV option if you want to play a Panzer IV company. I feel that the amount of points it eats up in other companies means all your points are in the one place. I mean, is it 4 of them or 3 of them? 4 of them I think is 40 points. Or is it 3 of them is 40 points actually? That's a lot of points. So you've got to consider very carefully if you want to spend those points as support for another company, or if you're a Panzer IV company, then fair enough. That's the theme, that's what you're going for. You can be quite comfortable with what you're getting for your points. So, tricky one. The Panzer IV in mid-war. It's kind of coming in like sort of Tiger type points, but not Tiger type survivability. It's got a lot of punch, but doesn't necessarily survive very well. And there's your 2 options. Mobile artillery or mobile anti-tank. That's what you've got to think about for these guys. Marders are a particular popular choice in our games for both me and Brian, and I have seen comments on other videos saying that you never leave home without the Marders. Now, the obvious reason for that is the gun, anti-tank 12, and you can get 4 of them for I think something like 16 points. You know, so 8 shots of anti-tank 12 perhaps of an ambush. It's very effective. In a Grenadier company they could be backing up other anti-tank guns, and if you're dealing with reckless Soviet armour, then you're going to be getting a lot of hits. But they don't have much in the way of armour, and if your opponent can get close to them or catch them in the open, then you're going to lose them really, really quick. You're going to try and blitz them and then shoot and scoot them. If you've got a hill, the crest of a hill, then ideal. But once again, if you fail at shoot and scoot, or if the blitz doesn't work out right and you've got a reduced rate of fire and then you can't get back off the hill because you can't do your shoot and scoot, they're very exposed. That's why some people might perhaps choose Panzer IVs for their heavy anti-tank hitting. But they're really, really cheap. And I find them quite effective. And another thing that's good with them in the game is your opponent tends to get marder eyes, and they can't just take the eyes off the marders and deal with the marders. They want to get rid of that threat, and they quite often miss something else that's going on, or miss an opportunity because they're staying put or staying hidden, refusing to move at reduced rate of fire just to finish the marders off. I've seen it myself, I've fallen victim to that myself, but marders had a great option for mobile anti-tank. So lighter options. So we've got armour cars here. You've also got the SBZB, whatever the hell it is, anti-tank gun option, which can be quite good. It gives you that anti-tank 7, which is good for an armoured car. But you know what, a machine gun might be just as good depending on how you plan to use them. But these are a nice cheap option. I mean, they come in cheaper than a heavy machine gun, I think, or the same price as adding a heavy machine gun to a grenadier platoon. So they're a good cheap option. They're a mobile option. You can take advantage of scout rules and move into no man's land in certain missions. So they're very handy for that. Or as a little firefighting force to run around and distract and maybe just get some support to an objective for the critical turn that is needed. There are the heavier armour cars. Don't have any of them painted for mid-war. The 8-wheeled armour cars. They've just got better armour. More or less the same in other respects. Maybe differences in movement, but it's basically 3 points of armour on the front compared to 1 for these guys. But they're in smaller units. Units of 2, which isn't ideal, because as soon as you lose one, they're on a not very good last stand rating. And then you've got another light option, which is the Panzer IIs. And I quite like using Panzer IIs in the games if you've got the points going spare, but typically that means you're going to be using them with a tank company, because the 6 points that it costs for these 3 could be spent on mortars, heavy machine guns. It could be put towards another marder, you know, if you've got a grenadier company. So you won't typically see these supporting infantry. So think of these as a small tank option for a panzer company. So there you go, there's your light options. Be very careful what your choices are. You've got entire companies you can take of them, but I've never seen them do very much as a force. Just get shot to bits, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, considering they've got no armour to speak of. But these guys, a good option for grenadiers or for panzer companies. These guys more of an option for panzer companies. Oh, and there's one thing, I know that you cannot push back ambushes anymore like you used to do, and that's one thing I really liked scouts for in previous versions of the game. But you can still effectively flush out ambushes. If you've got a terrain feature that you want to advance through or past, and you're concerned about an ambush being deployed there, you can still run over and try and occupy it, or you can force your opponent to pop their ambush against these lighter elements. That's what I'd be thinking of in terms of them carrying out a scout rule. But it's a suicide scout rule, but role rather. But there you go. That's how I would choose to use these. And in games where I've failed to use them, I've quite often ended up bogged down. You know, like trying to knock out anti-tank guns that have popped an ambush in somewhere that I should have been able to deny them with the scouts. There you go, folks. It's choice in mid-war for German medium armour. It's really down to what style you want to play, what type of company you're playing. So just remember, as I said, look for the right balance, depending on what kind of company. If you're supporting grenadiers, look for the right balance of either survivability and anti-tank, or just hard-hitting anti-tank, or for versatility. This selection is very good for a Panzer III formation. You know, longs, shorts and snub nose 75s, great combination. Get the best of all the worlds there. And then Panzer IV is a bit more of a specialist thing. I think, you know, if you're going to play Panzer IV, it's best to stick to an entire company and work hard at making that effective. Have scouts to help clear the way so you don't get your guys knocked out rapidly by ambushing anti-tank guns or tanks, and then start to use your shooting scoot, your blitz, you know, all these skills, and start fencing with the opponent, taking them out and hiding and wearing them down basically. So I hope that's of some use to you folks as a reflection on the games that you've been seeing on the channel over the last few weeks, and we'll probably do the same with Soviets. So keep your eye out for that, and don't forget we're moving on to Kursk next, so we'll have a few reflections on that when we finish those series of games. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.